Well, there are a number of things going on in the world, and one of those things going on in the world is that there has been another Trump victory. So it looks like in Michigan, despite a sizable protest vote, that Trump has won, and all along those lines. So definitely Biden and Trump win, but goes Gaza protest definitely sent a message. So definitely there was a sizable amount of uncommitted voters, and of course, folks are wondering if some of those folks might not be sitting out the regular election because there has been speculation about that they might decide to sit out the general election as part of their protest and all along those lines. And Pope Francis is undergoing diagnostic tests in a Rome hospital, and that is something that is going on as he visits Rome's Gemelli Hospital for tests and then returns to the Vatican after dealing with flu symptoms. So apparently the Pope was under the weather and all along those lines. And Navalny's widow is worried about arrest as the funeral is set for that Putin critic. So definitely, Yelena Navalny has warned Europe of the need to confront Putin. So that is something else that we are seeing. And apparently, Russia is relishing NATO disarray after a hasty denial of plans to deploy ground troops. So Russia warns against NATO ground intervention in Ukraine. So that is something that is going on as well. So we know a lot of folks are paying attention, as Rick Rosner said, to both the Middle East and to Europe, particularly around Ukraine. And amid U.S. pressure for reform, the entire PA government, that would be the Palestinian Authority, has submitted its resignation to Abbas. So the Palestinian Authority is promising changes, and many Palestinians are saying that it's not enough. So the Palestinian Prime Minister resigned, but Gaza isn't ready for a new Palestinian government. So it looks like they are going to do an entire overhaul in that area. So it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that as well. And Hamas's officials shut down Biden's ice cream diplomacy and reject a ceasefire deal. So Hamas said to deride deal outlined as Zionist document as Qatar gets involved as well. So Qatar is involved, and Biden has said that Israel would halt fighting during Ramadan, which of course is a Islam holiday and everything, if a hostage deal is reached. So that is something else that is going on as well. And Prince Harry apparently has lost security court ruling, potentially impacting his visit to the UK. So the court tosses Prince Harry's appeal against downgrading his security protection. So apparently, this is another embarrassment for the royals. And definitely, Sweden is now joining, it looks like, NATO, and they're saying that that could add to NATO's military arsenal. So definitely it'll be interesting to see what that goes on as Hungary approves Sweden's bid to join NATO. And Biden is acting to stop sales of sensitive personal data to China and Russia. So White House looks to curb foreign powers' ability to buy Americans' sensitive personal data with an executive order. So the U.S. is to limit sales of Americans' personal data to China and other adversaries. So maybe you won't be having things like TikTok and others getting your data, but we'll have to see what folks that are in the data space have to say about that as well. And apparently in South Korea, in the world's lowest fertility rate has plunged again in 2023. So last year, South Korea, which has one of the world's lowest fertility rates, saw that fertility plunging. And it looks like South Korea keeps shattering its own record for world's lowest fertility rate. And I'm sure some folks will be trying to find out why women in South Korea are choosing not to have children and all along those lines. But yeah, apparently they have one of the lowest fertility rates out there, and maybe Rick Rosner's got some thoughts about that as well. So I'll be getting ready to bring people on very shortly and see what their thoughts are about a number of these news stories as well. And there is EU's von der Leyen says that leaders should consider using frozen Russian assets to bolster Ukraine's military. So she also said that Europe must ramp up the defenses to the threat. So definitely that is something that is going on, and it's calling for a new defense industry strategy with locally made arms at its heart. So definitely one of the breakaway regions from Russia, Moldova, is or one of the breakaway regions, I should say, in general, is asking Russia for help. So definitely that is something that is going on as well. So breakaway Moldavian region is asking Russia for protection. So definitely we'll see what goes on in that part of the world and what folks have to say about that also. As I said about the Middle East crisis is in a second day of aid airdrops, which underscores the urgency of the Gazians and the Gazian people. IDF says it coordinated humanitarian airdrops to southern Gaza by several nations. So Palestinians are rushing to shore as aircraft drop aid into Gaza amid the Israel war. So definitely that is something that is going on, just like we're seeing that Biden and Netanyahu are definitely having different views of what's going on in that space. Apparently, they're saying that those two gentlemen are seeking opposing goals in the ceasefire talks. So they are sparring over support for the conflict. And as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the U.S. would be doing a hell of a lot more after a terror attack. So definitely he's even saying what would happen in if the U.S. had been attacked by a terrorist as well. So it'll be interesting to see what folks have to say about that and a number of these other stories that I've been getting to as well. So definitely there's a lot going on in the world, even some positive news in the social space, because apparently the actor Lena has announced their marriage to the Gaganon astronaut Prasas Nair and reveals she was waiting for Prime Minister Modi's announcement. So Prime Minister Modi reveals the name of 4 astronauts for the Gaganon mission, and apparently the Malayalam actor Lena announced she is married to one of those astronauts as well. So definitely, I guess she is very excited about the fact that she is married to somebody that is going up in space and all along those lines. And by the way, definitely it seems like many in Iran are frustrated by unrest and poor economy. So the poor economy isn't just impacting us here in the U.S. and being an issue that folks think about from a United States standpoint, but it's in other countries as well, as Iran is bracing for a low election turnout as calls for resistance vote falls on deaf ears. So definitely there are some folks that are very frustrated about what's going on in their part of the world as well. So we do know that these things are taking place all over the world where folks are frustrated in one way or the other. And like I said, it does look like the Michigan primary went in the way of Biden and Trump, despite that protest vote and everything. And over there in Indiana, the Indiana ban on gender affirming care for minors is to go into immediate effect. So the federal court has let Indiana's ban on gender affirming care for minors take place. So this is something that I'm sure a lot of folks in the LGBTQIA community will be paying attention to as well. And apparently there's a fire again, not just in California, but in Texas. So there is a rapidly growing Smokehouse Creek fire in Texas, and wildfires are spreading across the Texas Panhandle, forcing evacuation. So that is something that we are seeing as well. And of course, we do see that there's a number of people that are paying attention to the Fani Willis case and definitely what was going on between Fani Willis and Nathan Wade. So definitely there are a lot of folks that are paying attention to that, just like some folks are thinking about the government shutdown, and a threat of a government shutdown is being driven by GOP demands and apparently divisions within the GOP and all along those lines. But Congress is nearing a partial spending bill, but the ticking clock raises fear of a shutdown. So we're definitely going to hear what folks have to say about that as well. And Supreme Court is weighing Trump's ban on a gun bump stock. So definitely the Supreme Court bump stock ban oral argument. So there's a fight over the bump stock ban, and we're going to find out more about that, because apparently some people are saying that is a bump stock a machine gun. So I'm not sure about that. I'm also not sure why we might be getting tornadoes in Ohio, but apparently there are tornadoes suspected in severe storms that struck central Ohio. But like I said, going to bring folks in. Maybe Nick Palveda has got some ideas of what a bump stock is, or Lee Newton Rhodes, or even Rick Rosner, or a number of other ones. But definitely there's a lot going on. What's your take on some of these items that I brought up and all along those
right,
lines?
so bump stock is a stock on the the wooden part of your gun. If you think of a rifle that chambers a new bullet every time, using the recoil of the previous bullet, so it gets your gun closer to being fully auto. It lets you fire faster. So yeah, it's a. I mean, there are certain guns even now we don't allow. Tommy guns, the 1930s style, Chicago gangster type machine gun. You can't have one of those, and so this thing
You can't have one of those, but then you got people that will get the toy guns that look realistic, and that has been an issue as well. Because some of those toy guns, particularly in the year of 2024, can look almost as real as a real gun. And I do know that there have been people that have gotten in trouble.
Yeah, don't freaking people get shot for that stuff.
Right.
So. But all right, so in Michigan, the polls were particularly wrong about the strength of Trump's support. Now, Trump won hugely. He got 68% of the vote, but the polls said he'd get 78%. The polls said Biden would get 77%. Biden got 81%. This is the fourth time out of 4 primaries or caucuses that the polls have overestimated how well Trump would do. Which,
Rick, along those same lines and everything, one of the things that we talked about on one of our other shows here on the network yesterday is there is a significant, because of the Israel-Palestine war, and there's a significant Islam population there in Michigan, but they weren't the only ones. There was a significant protest vote, and I've heard from some of the grapevine that some of those protest votes may sit on their hands in November and all along those lines. So I was just wondering, as one that is a self-avowed Democrat, are you concerned about the protest vote, whether it's in Michigan or other places as well?
A little bit, but America's only 1% Muslim. Right. So it shouldn't affect the election that much, except that the Muslims in America are concentrated in certain swing states like Michigan. Even so, the protest vote, the uncommitted, came in at like 13.2%, and compared to Obama, where it was 11% in one of his races. So it's not like they made a lot of inroads. So yeah, I'm a little concerned, but at the same time, Biden the election's still 8.5 months away, and Biden is working towards a ceasefire. So I'm hopeful that, that it won't hurt his chances that much. And like I said, the polls are overestimating Trump's chances.
Rick, Donald Trump Jr. went after a very unusual vote block and everything. Speaking of unusual vote block, but he was saying that he was appealing to the gun owners. Not that that's all that unusual for a Republican and everything, but he also made an appeal to the Amish voters. He thought that the Amish should come out and vote for the Republican candidate, and that he would be a better candidate than Biden. So I found that unusual and was talking about that earlier. And I see I've got Nick Palveda as well. But Nick, what's your take on apparently Donald Jr. a few days ago went after the Amish vote and was thinking that the Amish, which is not another big part of the population, needed to switch over to the Republican Party and everything. So I found that very unique when I saw Donald's son trying to target the Amish voters. You're on mute, Nick.
Small percentage, Mark. I mean, the thing is, you're going after nobody, so they're wasting their time. It's just like the Muslims, 1%? It's not a big voter pool. So the politicians like to go after the big, juicy voter pool, the ones that can actually make a difference. But here's where I see the trends happening. Our friend, what's her name? Nikki Haley. Okay. Yeah. Apparently she is not conservative enough. She's backed by the Koch brothers. Mm-hmm. Well, the Koch brothers decide in their infinite wisdom they're not going to back losers. So as she's not winning, they pulled her financing. So now she's riding on independent people, small fish. Because remember, the joke, all men are created equal, is that in one of our legal documents? Is a joke. It's not true. Some people are more equal than others. The Koch brothers are a lot more equal than anybody on this panel, or frankly, most, if not everybody listening to this, because they're worth tens of billions of dollars and you're not. Okay, so the Koch brothers pull out and individual investors come in. The individual investor they just don't have near the money or the clout. So here's what's going to happen. Nikki Haley is going to ride that to, what is it, Super Tuesday, which
Super
is
Tuesday.
A week away from now.
a week and that way from now. Okay, she's going to find out she doesn't have the pull that Trump does, and she'll be out of the race. So it'll come down to the two-person race that we anticipated months ago. It'll be Trump versus Biden, and we'll just have to see how that plays out, because Trump is always a wild card, and Biden is old. And so, it's anybody's game, no matter what the polls say, because a lot can happen between now and November. It is very sad that the United States of America can't get a better candidate. And so,
well, there were a couple of court cases. I want to bring back Nick and everything.
Well, hold on. I want to say, Biden is old as heck. He looks old as heck. He's got that old man thing where his mouth is always open a little bit. Somebody on his team needs to say, just keep your mouth more. But the deal is, Biden has 47 years of experience holding national level political office, 36 as senator, 8 as VP. And that's 20 more years experience than anybody else who's ever run for president. And that's not nothing. It makes him, he walks like a rusty robot, but he's actually like good at his job as being president. And I hope that counts for something, because the other guys
for something. But Lee Roten brought up a couple of things on our other stories and everything, but he was saying about gender affirming care, that gender affirming care is lifelong and sterilizes the person, and it is irreversible, and should it be illegal on minors and everything. So that was one of the things I was going to ask.
A lot of it is
lawyer, Nick.
So a lot of it is illegal for minors, but like puberty blockers, which now people can argue about whether they're harmless or not, but at least puberty blockers don't have severe side effects that I know of for most people, and they can give a kid who's got some gender dysmorphia a couple of extra years to figure out what they want to do before the gender effects of natural hormones kick in and make it much harder to adjust gender. So if you're
I've listened to this stuff since I was 3 years old, literally, because my mom was the head nurse at Tampa General Hospital back in the 1940s, and she used to tell me all the interesting stories and these books on diseases I used to read when I was a kid. They're just absolutely horrible. But one problem that she said, well, every now and then we get a hermaphrodite. Well, what's that? You get a kid who's born with both sexual organs. Like, no kidding. And now what are we supposed to do? Now, back then, it was usually the doctor, the parents, they made a decision. It was all kept quiet and off.
When the kid's just a little baby.
The kid's a little baby. Hey, Rick, the kid just came out of the chute. Okay, seriously. And then all of a sudden the doctor inspects, make sure that all the limbs are there and all that stuff. And then they have 2 sets of sexual organs, and decisions have to be made. So,
but they don't have to be made, it turns out, because there are a ton of people, not a ton, but like hundreds, thousands of kids where they made the call, and then the kid's like, well, no, I feel like the other, and you cut it off because you had to choose. Don't choose. And just, you have a kid with both sets of sexual organs, and you wait for the kid to figure out what the kid wants to be.
Hey, Rick and Nick, there are people that are part of that community that apparently have moved up the ranks, and they have done well in the military. But a member of the Donald Trump camp and everything is definitely very upset at this, because apparently Rachel Levine is got a office, was a assistant secretary for health and I forget the rest of the title and everything, but definitely they have moved up into the rank. They are definitely transsexual and all along those lines. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, in her infinite wisdom, has accused Rachel Levine, who apparently is serving our country, of mental illness and everything. So apparently, just wondering if y'all have been following this back and forth and all along this line, because apparently there is some back and forth. Because apparently they are thinking that she is going to be in favor of some of this transgender care.
So you should just Google trans soldiers. Like when you look at the trans soldiers fighting in America, like you'll be convinced that they can do the job. Some trans soldiers who started, female to male are these like just muscular killing machines. They you can do plus like how many there are plenty of positions. Yeah, I'm on Rachel Levine's side. I consider
the thing is, like I said, the people that look at it, they don't realize that this is difficult for the people that are involved. I mean, I had one cousin who used to work at my dad's company that became transgender. He was a he all the time until he decided he was a she. But the thing is, what are you going to do? I had one person I hired in my company. I didn't know he was a she, but she was a he, but he was good at what he did, even though he was a she. And frankly, I don't give a rat's rear. So the thing
you're
is,
just probably looking at what their work that they're doing, and that's probably what the military is doing. Because, by the way, the title is she is Assistant Secretary for Health and all along this line. Apparently, she got in trouble because she also made a statement that I personally believe in, but not everybody believes in, because she was talking about how climate change can have a disproportionate effect on the physical and mental health of African Americans, and part of that is because of where the some of the plants are placed at, and where some of the even disposal is done. Because, like I said, I grew up in Warren.
I think I'm in drag as much as any drag queen. Like when I was a teenager, I couldn't get a girlfriend. I'm like, well, I need to make myself more masculine. So I started lifting weights all the time. I still lift weights every day. I took steroids. I grew a beard. I've thought like Rambo that chicks might dig scars. So I frickin' gave myself giant scars. That's as much like gender, affirming action as anybody who takes. I took hormones. Steroids are hormones, except in my case, I was, a guy trying to be more of a guy. We all have like behavior that relates to our gender, and
I mean, there are some gentlemen and some there are some women that are considered overly masculine, just like there are some men that are considered effeminate and everything. So definitely there is. I think that we all have a little bit of femininity and masculinity, no matter what your gender is, and all on those lines. But there are some that maybe lean one way or the other.
Mark, why are we obsessed with this? There's so many issues in the world that we need to deal with that are serious issues. It's like I said, from my personal opinion, I don't give a rat's rear about the whole conversation, because to me, it won't make a difference in my life. It ain't gonna make my life better. It ain't gonna make it worse. It's gonna do nothing. I do look at the economy. The economy actually can make my life better. I can live better if we have a better economy, and I can live like trash when it's a bad economy.
Well,
so
speaking of trash, apparently, speaking of trash, I got to get to Donald Trump's comments, because apparently Donald Trump is speaking in front of the Black Conservative Federation. He implied that Black Americans could relate to him due to his multiple indictments, and apparently the press secretary, who is an African American woman, on yesterday slammed him. So during a press briefing, she stated, just being very candid here, it's repugnant and it's divisive to traffic in racist stereotypes. That's what we have seen, and that affects all Americans, right? You're tearing up all Americans by doing this. It is again divisive and repugnant, and it's coming from obviously a former president of the United States and everything. So apparently she wasn't too happy with his remarks and all along these lines. And Jean-Pierre added, and in any context, it is profane to compare the long, painful history of abuse and discrimination suffered by Black Americans to something that is totally different than self-serving purposes. That's what we saw from the former president. So definitely, I think she was even asked if President Biden was viewing.
In 2016, Trump got 9% of the Black vote. In 2020, he got 8% of the Black vote. He claims he gets 20%, but he's full of crap. He says whatever pops into his head. It's not strategic. It's just BS.
Well, his exact quote that he did at the DCF gala and everything was, I got indicted for nothing, for something that is nothing. And a lot of people said that's why Black people like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against, and they actually viewed me as I'm being discriminated against. It's pretty amazing, but possibly, maybe there's something there. So definitely.
So let's say that would convince 1% of the Black voters. Black people are 13% of the American population. 1% of 13% is 1/8 of 1%.
Yeah,
So
it's meaningless.
it just doesn't help him.
Yeah,
it
the
doesn't
only
help.
way he'll get the black vote, he's got to have Tim Scott as his running mate. But I believe he's not going to do that, Mark. He's going to reach for the attractive lady, whoever it might be, because it's the nature of this beast. Gibbard, whatever her name is, she seems to be pretty attractive, but it doesn't
Tulsi
matter.
Gabbard's pretty.
Tulsi Gabbard,
Christy
yeah.
Noem's pretty.
Yeah, right. In other words, he's going to reach for the pretty woman and put the pretty woman on the ticket with him. So he said he's already made up his mind. I thought, well, he's going to look for try to trim down the trim down the Biden support, and he'll either grab Tim Scott to trim down the Trump to get more support from the black community, or he's going to take a female. Which my bet he'll take a female because of the math. Even though he doesn't do math, we know that, Rick. The black community is 13%, female community is 50%.
But I mean,
But also, like one strategy is that a lot of presidents have used is to pick a candidate from a populous state. Tulsi Gabbard used to represent Hawaii, teeny. Kristi Noem, South Dakota, teeny. So he doesn't get a bump from appealing to South Dakotans.
No, but he's looking across the map. He goes,
my question to you, Nick, is either of those candidates going to work with the suburban women? Because suburban women is what has hurt him in the midterm elections and all along those lines. So is that going to help him in that sense?
I mean, it's going to be his choice.
He lost a ton of women with all the abortion craziness.
Yeah, but he's going to bring a woman onto his ticket, to be the vice president running mate. He also needs somebody obsequious. Michael Pence was perfect for him. Somebody who wouldn't raise, any controversy whatsoever during 4 years. He wouldn't challenge anybody. He wouldn't challenge, a fly to be on a bunch of dung. I mean, it's just the nature of his beast.
Well, hopefully Lee will come back. But Lee was asking a question about one of our other popular issues. So I've got to ask you, because you have definitely been one that has been very adamant about this. But Lee Rhodes, before he left, and hopefully he'll come back, was saying that the bump stock ban, are we fringing on the Second Amendment again? And I know that you've actually said that we might need to fringe on the Second Amendment. And he's saying that Tommy gun is fully automatic. How about the all semi-automatics? Almost every handgun is semi-automatic, every gun with a magazine. So I'm just wondering, I heard you say several times that you are not a big fan of the Second Amendment, and maybe the Second Amendment needs to go.
But realize it's the court that gets to interpret the Second Amendment, just like freedom of speech shall not be, infringed upon. But at the same time, we infringe on freedom of speech all the time. Otherwise, you wouldn't have defamation lawsuits. Think about it. Okay. So the thing is, if you start looking at it, free speech has limits that what the court puts on. The Second Amendment could have limits if the court decides to put limits on the Second Amendment. So far, the court has just done nothing, and Congress has done nothing to limit what people can have in terms of what I call weapons of mass destruction. And we've had people on our panel argue they're not weapons of mass destruction, yet somebody takes an AK-47 and mows down a bunch of people and they go, hey, that's okay. It's not okay. But it's going to be up to the court to put limits on the Second Amendment, or better off is just repeal the amendment altogether. And then what happens is, which won't happen, but if it did happen, then you could have the states have their own individual laws. I also believe there are safe zones in this country. One is airports. I used to fly a lot. I don't do it as much as I did. I was flying around the country doing speeches every other week for like 10 years. I did like 2,000 of them. Okay, so I was on airplanes every other week. And every time I went through the airport security, I knew one thing. I was safe. I was in a safe zone. Nobody had guns and nobody had knives, etc. When I go to court, and I try to stay away from court, you put everything down and you're in a safe zone. You're in court. Now, outside the courtroom, they can go kill each other. But once you're in the courtroom, you're pretty safe. And today, when you go to Broadway plays, believe it or not, they have security guards, and you go through metal detectors, seriously, to go to a Broadway play. So now you're in a safe zone. What you're going to do, I think you're going to see going forward with schools, because they're all trying this technology. It's some tech guy trying to sell them stupid technology. Is you're going to see airport courtroom type security in certain places, which will make that place a safe zone. You could even do it in malls today, where you actually have to go through security. I've been going through security a lot of places, even overseas. When you go into these places. You go through security now to make sure it's a safe zone. We can create safe zones. In
Yes, the question about those safe zones, Nick, is are they always safe? Because I want to say that there was actually
Sure they are.
security that school that was recently shot up last year and everything. I think that they actually had security on campus, and I think that in some cases, because a lot of the schools also have metal detectors, so a lot of times that is already the case. I was actually this has nothing to do with
Mark, Rick, name one airport shooting that took place in the last 10 years.
But not so much airport shootings, but
there is. No. Name one. Name one, Mark. Oh, you can't. Neither can Rick because it didn't happen. Okay, so with proper,
they do take away quite a few guns that people like. People forget they're carrying a gun, and they go to the airport, and then they get caught. And like, so airport security across the country takes away, I don't know, hundreds of guns a year.
Rick, I was watching Rick and Nick. I was watching a show yesterday, and while it was a fictional show, it is also based a lot of these fiction shows on true life and everything along those lines. And while it might not be that the guns are getting there or they're causing the act and everything, but I mean, you sometimes will see that in dramas where somebody is trying to hijack a plane, and I haven't heard of a hijacking in several years now, particularly here in the United States and everything. But that being said, one of the things we talk about is the border and all along those lines. And is the TSA really looking for drugs as actively as they should be? And are people literally going by on their backpacks and other things?
Probably because fentanyl,
everything. I'm thinking quite a few people are literally getting through the airports, traveling from place to place.
All right, let me say a thing. The current drug that's the most dangerous is fentanyl, and maybe some related, superpower. Like fentanyl is 100 times more powerful than heroin, which means that a dose that is the size of 2 grains of salt is enough to kill you. It's hard to, to catch all that when enough fentanyl to get 100,000 people high is enough to fit inside a backpack. Exactly. It's hard to detect.
Yeah, and
my question, there's things like that, and I mean, there was a famous case. I mean, we don't have that many active military conflicts that we're involved in. I mean, we might be having bases in places and all along those lines, but there is not a active war that I can think about right off the top of my head that the U.S. is actively involved in. But we do know that way back in the Vietnam era, there were literally people that were shipping drugs from other places. I think
coffins,
there was a case where they were shipping them in their coffins and things along those lines.
Yeah, but heroin takes up a lot of space. Right. Fentanyl takes up a little teeny amount of space. So you can, and most fentanyl is carried in over the ports of entry, just the normal places where you cross the border in, Tijuana, El Paso, and carried by U.S. citizens, I think mostly by white people. So, I mean, it's not the people, it's mostly not the people hiking over the border, where there isn't a port of entry. It's mostly just people who look legitimately crossing the border.
Yeah, and then they're doing it for greed because they're making money. There's also a thing called Narcan. Roman Gabriel was telling me about that. Narcan has some a positive effect if somebody's ODing on fentanyl. I don't know that much about it, but he's trying to distribute Narcan around the country so that if somebody has an overdose on fentanyl, they can survive.
Right, and any responsible high school. My wife worked at a high school, and they had the pens where, if you remember Pulp Fiction, where they stab Uma Thurman in the chest.
Yeah, right. I saw that.
It's kind of like
that.
Really? Yeah. See, I'm not familiar with the antidote, but the thing is, there is ways to do that so you can save people's lives.
Every ambulance crew in the country has those pens, and they get a call, especially in places that are like just rife with ODs in Kentucky, and they haul ass over there and they stab them and they bring them back.
If you look at the pure numbers of people that are dying of fentanyl, it's staggering.
100,000 a year. I mean, it's
a year. Yeah,
it's on the scale of what COVID was killing during the worst years of COVID.
Right. And the news media really doesn't do much service, and neither does Congress, about tackling this issue. I mean, we should probably do a whole series. I know Roman Gabriel has something on that. We're going to try to bring it on the Pod TV network
Mhm.
about the fentanyl problem, because 100,000, if you think about how big that number is, that's 3 times more plus than all the Ukrainians have died so far fighting Russia.
100,000 is almost 3 times as many people as die from guns every year in the U.S.
Yeah, and you know what? How much press it gets, Rick? 0. I mean, it's like
No,
it's
I've seen a
very,
couple
very
of stories about the fentanyl crisis and everything, not as much as the war in Ukraine or the war in Israel, but I have seen some coverage of the crisis from a medical standpoint. So there are definitely people that are
Yeah,
concerned
but
about it.
also I guess that, I don't know, some huge percentage, maybe even more than half of the people who die from fentanyl don't even know they were taking fentanyl. They
Yeah.
were they bought some other drug like ecstasy, and somebody had goosed the drug to make it more, give you a bigger high by adding fentanyl, but
Yeah.
they, you know, screwed it up and put a fatal dose in there, so you have a lot of
I mean, Rick, weren't you a bartender at one point? Because I've heard of several people, and I don't know how actively the bartenders are paying attention. Because I've heard several incidents where people literally are getting slipped in their drink and are totally unaware of it, because they might be at a nightclub or whatever, or a bar, and either somebody there or somebody wants to do a nefarious act, so they are placing it in that kind of space. I just wondered, as a former bartender, how actively were you paying attention?
I was a door guy. I wasn't a bartender.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I didn't see or hear about a lot of people, but this was mostly in the 80s, some 90s. I didn't, maybe I was just naive. Maybe we all were. I didn't hear about a lot of people getting roofied back then.
You know, there were definitely people getting roofied even back in the 80s and the 90s, and
I mean,
definitely
I'd say that
on campuses and everything.
When I worked in bars, the main problem was over serving alcohol. One of the bars I worked at had forfers. You pay for, on Friday afternoon, pay for 1 drink. They set out 4 drinks. The one bar in Texas used to have a wheel you'd spin to see how many drinks you'd get for the price of 1. And the wheel, like, you could win up to 12 drinks for the price of 1 drink. The 70s, the 80s were very crazy.
I don't know if they're still active. Maybe Nick knows, since he's in the legal field, even though it's not the type of law that he does and everything. But I know, having several friends that are restaurant owners, and some of them that the restaurant also served as a bar, that one of the people that they most feared is the ABC, because a lot of times there were labeling issues, because, you know, you're supposed to keep things correctly labeled and all along those lines. But there were even
alcohol beverage
would literally switch labels and everything. So that was something that they feared.
So the ABC has a lot of pissant rules, alcohol and beverage control guys. They send undercover cops in to see if your bar is doing things right. And if they don't like you, like, I worked in some bars that were in fancy neighborhoods, and in a fancy neighborhood, the people who live there know who to call to get the ABC to come down on you. And we got dinged for things like, they'd hold up, once they announced themselves, they'd walk around the bar and they'd hold up a bottle. And, like, if there was a fruit fly at the bottom, you know, a fly had flown in through the little nozzle part and died in the alcohol. If they found a fly in a little teeny one of those gnat things, that you could get dinged for that. It was, you know, so.
How exciting, you know. It's not an issue in my life, because I just don't do any of that stuff. So it's, you know.
Yeah, you try to stay away from that kind of law. I know you try to stay away from it.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, see, people don't realize, I mean, law is a big field that covers a lot of spaces, Mark. So there's a lot of space that I don't even work in. So I say it's best for you to go to find a lawyer that works in that particular area, in that particular controversy. There's some lawyers I know specialize in First Amendment rights, you know, and then that's all that they do. So it depends on, you know, I always tell people you got to find the right.
Yeah, well, you have to find the right lawyer. It's funny that you said that, because, you know, we started a timeshare program, and I had mentioned that one of the people that I'm involved with is involved in veterans' rights, and he does a lot around health veterans' rights. So, like, some of the things that took place in the notion of what was going on with some of the misuse of chemicals and other things in near Fayetteville. So a lot of the veterans had been impacted by the contaminated water and a number of other things that were taking place in Fayetteville. So he was more interested in that kind of health issues and things that were directly impacting the soldiers. So when I mentioned Tara, who I think was one of the guests on the show and everything, he actually did what you did. He pivoted it. He was like, no, have them contact a timeshare lawyer, because that's not even what
right. There's
deals with and
attorneys who
everything.
specialize in that area. See,
Right.
when you're looking for a lawyer, you want to look for a specialist in that particular area of the law, and they're kind of hard to find, but they're really not, because I've sent a lot of referrals over when I look through their CV, look through them, and then say, hey, look, you need to go see this person. But I work in such a very narrow area that basically 99.9% of the legal area I don't even work in, and frankly, I don't care to work in.
Timeshare is a high pressure sales product.
Yeah. Well,
where you get invited. They like have a 2-night vacation on us. Come see our place.
Right.
And then all you have to do is listen to a presentation. They put you in the presentation and they say, look, great deal. Great. You love the place. You stayed here. You can get it. And we have this deal that expires in half an hour. You sign up now. And then they work you. And you end up with, you buy a timeshare. You can't sell it. There are companies who specialize in helping you sell your timeshare. Once you've decided it's a bad deal, those companies are another bad deal. That's just another way to
we have Rick, we have a whole show on timeshares now. I mean,
maybe there are good ones.
Well, she says there's good ones and there's bad ones, just like everything. But I've gone to a lot of those junkets, and hey, the week is $15,000, and then I said, no, I'm not interested. You leave, then all of a sudden, hey, but it's 9,000. Just a minute, and you're leaving again. My boss is going to do a special. It's 8,000, and
Nick, you sometimes get on our colleges and what they do and everything, but there was a widow of a top Warren Buffett investor, and apparently she is going to cover the tuition for the fine medical school students over there in the Bronx and everything. So I just wanted your thoughts about this, because apparently it is a $1 billion donation that will provide free tuition at a Bronx medical school. So she's given $1 billion that will give free tuition.
Mark, there's some mentions out there. She is going to donate $1 billion to pay for medical education at Shiva University as an endowment, a permanent endowment. See, that's a great thing to do. That's what billionaires should do, Mark, except there are a lot of them that don't do that. Jeff Bezos is one of them, greedy SOB. Another one, of course, is Elon Musk, super greedy SOB. But what she did is, I think she did a very noble thing, Mark. She actually took $1 billion and she donated it to Shiva University to pay all these medical students tuition. And realize there's a lot of medical doctors, they go and hawk $500,000 in tuition and fees. And when they got out of medical school, they owe $500,000.
The third leading cause of death is mistakes made by doctors.
Yeah.
And I would rather have a doctor who's got be treated by a doctor who's got zero medical debt than $500,000. But the doctor with $500,000 medical debt might be a little distracted on a daily basis.
You think? I mean, to me, it's a real problem. But if you want to go to
by the way, speaking of problems, there's a problem with our government funding, because apparently a Lubbock, Texas federal judge ruled yesterday that lawmakers, that would be lawmakers around the country and everything, unconstitutionally passed a $1.7 trillion government funding bill in 2022 when they did so under pandemic era rule, allowing members of the U.S. House of Representatives to vote on the matter by proxy instead of in person. So Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, a Republican, requested the courts block a provision of the funding bill that gave pregnant workers stronger legal protections. And the U.S. District Court apparently is getting involved in this as well and everything. So what are we going to see about this? Because apparently U.S. District Judge Wesley Hendricks reviewed the request and issued a limited ruling on one of the two provisions Paxton sought to have blocked. And Hendricks was appointed by former President Trump, and ruled the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was wrongfully passed, blocking the law from being enforced against the state.
Nick knows judges. Nick can tell you that a lot of the people appointed by Trump are kind of crappy judges.
Okay. Also, remember, not all judges are created equal also, Mark, as we well know. There's what they call Article 3 judges, Article 1 judges, and they're different. Some are administrative law, some are U.S. District Court. But also, it really doesn't matter. because once you appeal the federal district judge, you go to the appellate courts, which there are about 12 or 13 appellate courts. Now they get to make the decision to reverse the federal district judge, which is probably what's going to happen. It'll go up on appeal, it'll be reversed, and you'll not hear the end of it. But because there's so many federal district judges out there, the opinions can differ. That's how I got my case before the United States Supreme Court. I did the oral arguments before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the decision of the Ninth Circuit varied from the Seventh Circuit. So you have what they call a conflict in jurisdiction, and you can't have a conflict because the thing is the Supreme Court has to unify so that all the courts are in unison. So we filed our appellate brief to the Supreme Court. Conflicts. Our circuit disagreed with the Seventh Circuit. Are you going to take it up? And you know what? They took it up. They only take 1 out of 1,000 cases. So I got my case before the U.S. Supreme Court 1 out of 1,000, and then we lost 9-0. We got hammered in the Supreme Court, but I won the case because the other side, after 10 years of litigation, and you're willing to take issues like this to the Supreme Court, yes, they decided to drop the case.
So Ken Paxton is insanely corrupt. He's been he's super. Just Google Ken Paxton and see all the criming he's done over his career.
Yeah. You know, the thing is, I've been in front of federal district judges. I asked one of them because he was obviously biased to recuse himself. And after I did that, this is the funny thing, because I'm in federal district. I was in federal court in Seattle, and one thing I give him credit for, when you ask a judge to basically step down, he put me first on the docket. And there were about 100 attorneys in the room, but a lot of these attorneys are sheep because they have to go in front of the judge again. And they don't want to challenge the judge because the judge could smack them on another case.
Smack them when they come back later and everything.
So he ruled against it and said, no, I'm going to stay on the case. And then 2 months later, they got rid of him because he's an alcoholic.
When you go to court, and I've only done one lawsuit, and it seems like when you go to court, it's a crap. You're rolling the dice. You don't want to go to court because, like in my case, we had a judge. You know, you go to court with a bunch of causes of action. Like, here's why we think we got screwed, and then the judge looks at the causes and said, "Well, no, this one's BS. This one's BS." But the judge let some of our causes of action stand. He said, "Yeah, there's an issue of fairness here." Then he retired, and they gave us a new judge who wasn't as familiar with the case, and he just threw it out. And
there you go.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. So that's
judge pro tem, which is like a substitute teacher of judges. Like those guys.
Along those lines, just a quick question for both you and Nick. And I know we've only got a few more minutes, but I got a couple of quick questions for you. But quick question for the both of you and everything. I was watching Court TV is apparently celebrating this famous case that took place many years ago, and it involved athletics, it involved Hollywood, and involved a number of other things. Court TV will say that it's the reason that they exist and everything along those lines. But will we ever find out the truth about the O.J. Simpson trial and whether O.J. did it or somebody else did it?
O.J. wrote a book called "If I Did It," which was where he explained how he did the killing. So yeah, we know.
You know, the thing is, he actually was found guilty in the civil case because the civil case has a different burden than the criminal case. Criminal case is beyond any reasonable doubt, and they used it quite effectively. I thought the attorneys did a good job saying there is a doubt here. Where civil, it's preponderance of the evidence, more evidence that he did than not. So he lost the civil, he won the criminal. And that's where it stood. But he did have a pension from the NFL, Mark, and I do pensions all the time, as you know. It's exempt from lawsuits and creditor claims, so he still gets his NFL pension.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second, Nick. I gotta back up. Hold on a second, Rick. I gotta back up because he later on, even though there is still question as to whether he did it or somebody else in his circle committed the crime, and I did hear about that in the book or movie and everything, but whether it happened or not, there is no doubt that he did commit a crime later. So he served a term, I think it was for robbery and everything. So you're saying that did not impact his pension?
No. You get to collect your pension no matter what. It's kind of a weird law that it's exempt under the Bankruptcy Abuse Consumer Protection Act of 2005, where they codified an old Supreme Court case for Shoemate versus Patterson, which everybody knows, except the people that are listening to this audience because they never read Shoemate. But Yeah, if you have a pension or you have retirement plans, they're exempt from lawsuits and creditor claims under federal law. So you get
Plus,
to keep it even if you file bankruptcy.
And even if you serve a criminal
Creditors,
time.
plus
so
Florida.
financially,
And Florida lets you keep your house even if there's a judgment against you. He moved to Florida so that
right.
Fred Goldman, one of the dad of the murdered kid, couldn't exercise couldn't take his house away.
Yeah, you can find that under Chapter 222 of the Florida statutes. It's known as the Homestead Act. The rule is you get to keep 160 acres outside the limits, city limits, plus whatever's on it, or a half acre inside the city limits. So in Florida, you actually do get to keep your house. The only other state that allows that is Texas, believe it or not. And there's whole law review articles. What's better, Texas and Florida? Florida wins by a hair as to being one of the best places to make yourself, quote unquote, judgment proof, because you get to keep your house, your pension, life contracts, annuity
But
contracts.
Nick, along those same
It's
lines,
all
and I'm
based
going
on
to
an
borrow
old
from.
Reconstruction Act called Homestead, which dealt when the Yankees came down and they tried to reconstruct the South. And so what they did is they passed this rule that makes these assets exempt from carpetbaggers and scalawags from taking Southerners' homes.
But Nick, along those same lines, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around this, because this is something else I borrowed from the world of fiction, but it was based on, a lot of fiction is based on reality and everything. But speaking of prisoners, I know that some states, if you are trained in certain fields, and you might be trained in fireman fields and other fields, you can not necessarily get the job when you get out of the prison system, because there are certain states that have rules about hiring felons, and then there are other states that don't have those rules. Matter of fact, that's part of part of the conversation going on. And it's part of the reason immigration will probably be part of the conversation with the murder in Georgia, because apparently that person had come into the country several times illegally and everything. But I just wanted your take on whether inmates that might be trained in one field or another, whether it's firework or cooking, should be allowed jobs after they get out. Because I do know some states certain jobs they won't allow them to have because of the safety concerns, like the firemen and other things.
I'm not sure where safety would be an issue on that, but there is conflicts of laws that exist, Mark. There's no question. Your laws can differ from state to state. It's just like in Nevada, prostitution and gambling are legal, where you go to North Carolina, it's illegal. Right. Except now they're allowing FanDuel and allowing you to do sports betting in North Carolina. So it's they do.
Well, speaking of sports betting,
we have a ton of we have a ton of fires in California, and we use a lot of convicts we'll run them into the fire zone to fight fires for probably $1 an hour, and those.
And it also depends on what type of felony took place. I mean, it could be a Securities Act felony, so somebody was guilty from insider trading or something like that. Why would that disqualify them for being a fireman? Talk to me. So I don't see where it can be uniformly applied at that point in time. So,
there's some cities and areas. I think Chicago has some rules against hiring felons, and there might be some others that have rules against hiring felons and everything. But like you said, it varies from place to place. But I want to get back to sports, because sports was in the news twice this weekend and everything. One involving our illustrious university. We're actually going to go visit the campus later on today and everything. But apparently there's this notion of storming the field after you upset somebody. And one of the Duke players apparently got injured when that happened last week. And now over in one of these celebrations took place with a college swimmer, and they have been stripped of their title after they were just doing a swimming celebration. And they're saying it was probably one of the dumbest things that had taken place, and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take, either from the fans or from the athletes.
Well, you don't see people storming the pool. I saw the footage of the basketball player getting hurt by a bunch of maniacs running out onto the court. But I would I'd like to see people storm the pool. That'd be fun.
See, the storming could be easily solved with about 10 football players with shields. And then when these stupid kids caught running, you just put the shields right in front of them and knock them senseless. And I think that would stop it pretty quick, because nothing else is going to stop it, because they're drunk with craziness. But getting level will stop these kids from doing that stuff. And what they need is what Duke needs to do is bring 10 of their offensive linemen. Have you ever talked to these offensive linemen? Some of the reason I got a football, I go, dude, you're the reason I got a football. And I was talking to a guy 6'8", 380 pounds, Mark. Okay, these people are not small. You run onto the field with them and they have a shield, they're going to flatten you so fast it'll make your head spin. And none of the basketball players will be injured. Basketball players, different story. He's 7 foot 235. He's a flyweight. You just knock him over. But these football players, none of those kids would have a chance, and it would stop this thing in an instant. So I would take 10 football players from Duke, the offensive, defensive linemen, give them shields, and if these kids approach, just put up the shields just like the old Greeks did, and level all those people from Wake Forest.
Yeah, that could work. I know we're heading down to the end, but I got to bring up one other story that I heard that sometimes these representatives are very good in maintaining their own political agendas and everything, but apparently they're not that good in taking care of their own kids, because apparently Representative Lauren Boebert's 18-year-old son has been arrested and faces 22 charges after a string of alleged theft. So we know Representative Boebert had already been in some trouble of her own in the political land front, but apparently she's been having issues trying to keep control of her kids. And like I said, I don't have any kids, but it's difficult to keep control of kids.
She's done, because after the deal where she was caught like fondling the genitals of her date during a musical performance, people just are sick of her, so much so that she had to switch districts. She switched from Colorado 3, I think, to Colorado 4, or the other way around, and she's in 5th place in that district. She's polling at 14%, so she won't get reelected. And yeah, her kid knocked up some other kid, I don't know, a year ago, and now, he's been charged with, among other things, contributing to the delinquency of a minor. You said it was for like home theft, or so he was probably breaking into houses with some underage buddy. And yeah, that whole family, the husband got arrested for showing his dick to teen girls in a bowling alley during a dispute a few years ago. Yeah, the whole family's a mess.
Yeah, that's the reason, that's the problem with representative government, Mark. I mean, when you have government by the people, for the people, all that other stuff, you get whatever comes out of the streets, and all of a sudden they end up in the White House, or they end up in Congress. Now, for years we had monarchies, we had royals, which yours truly is descended of. And the thing is, you're trained from birth not to be that way. And if you are that way, you get kind of like kicked aside, which unfortunately,
apparently you get kicked to the side.
There's one thing about her.
Did you just want to say they're kicking Prince Harry to the side?
Baby, you're dealing with
Prince Harry to the side.
Well, hold on. There's one thing about Boebert. People don't want her to get elected again, because if you get elected to Congress 3 times, you get that congressional salary as pension for life. And they look at her and they're like, this crazy, like, white trash lady, we don't want her to get that's
pension for life.
Yeah.
Hey, our buddy from the Angry Geeks just said hello. So hello, Lewis. Lewis was listening. And everything. So
you should watch it on the Pod TV network. So Lewis Perry, baby, he is the ultimate.
Check it out. But I know we'll go just maybe a minute over, but then we're going to stop because we're going to keep our engineers happy. But Nick, there is some speculation, because you keep saying that Trump is going to win. I hope that you're wrong, but I'm not saying that it is beyond the realm of possibility. But there is also some speculation that if he wins, he's going to change the rules. So we might have a monarchy if he wins. Is there any fear that you have of this? Because there are some people that are like that if he wins, that he will try to change the rules and have an 8-year or 12-year presidency. Or
the one thing about Trump is he's bad at stuff. So that's some degree of protection. He announced 7 infrastructure weeks while president, got 0 infrastructure spending passed.
Yeah,
so
see, the problem with our democracy is you got to work with the judicial branch, you got to work with the legislative branch, and so he can't be king. And so, too bad.
I mean,
he wouldn't make a good king anyway.
The most effective thing.
He's not a royal. I mean, he's an idiot.
The main change he made in America is getting all these Trumpy judges appointed, because those judges are
right. Yeah, he did. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg made a
screwed up.
Big boo-boo. She really screwed up. She should have resigned and allowed Obama to appoint her successors. Instead, she's hung on. And I believe Biden history will show he did the same boo-boo. He stayed on too long. He should have resigned. He said, look, this is it for me. I'm one term, I'm out, and allowed the Democrats to vet some new blood, but they didn't do it. So if this goes down the way I think it's going to go down, it's on Biden's head. And
well, there's some speculation. I was reading earlier today that there's speculation about a Obama takeover. So there was some conversation about Michelle and Barack getting together in order to push her to win.
People have
Michelle
this,
is not interested, and she's not presidential stuff.
People have this this fiction in their head that Michelle Obama is going to step in and save everything.
Yeah.
Michelle Obama has said for 10 years, ever since he got elected, she says, I hate the White House. I hate politics. She wants nothing. Right. Well, she's got zero, like, you know, I mean, she will not in a million years, not for $100 million.
She's a smart lady, and she realizes this is a sewer. Hey, it's like saying, how would you all want to swim in a sewer for the next 4 years? Nope, she's not interested. She's too smart.
She's not interested in, plus she's dealing with folks criticizing her daughter for not sticking Obama on the name, even though she is a talented actress and all along those lines. So there were people giving her flack for that. And of course, there are people, even our own Steve Rao, that have talked about this notion of Gavin Newsom jumping in the fray.
It's too late. There are 250 days left until the election. Yep. It's Biden has the best chance of any Democrat, because you can't get. I don't think you can get.
You can't mobilize the armies fast enough. That's the problem.
So it's the problem on that part. We're going to get on here. We got Thursday and Friday World Edition as well. And of course, tomorrow we also have World Politics, but another lively conversation. But time to get on out of here. And I'll see Rick on tomorrow and all along those lines. But time to get on out of here.
Bye.